So today we're going to be doing something a little bit different in the garage, because now that I have this shop space, I need to do something so that I can make the best of it. And I'm going to start by making a cart for my miter saw, because that way I'm not using it all the time, but I can pull it out, put it out in the driveway, so I'm not putting all this sawdust in the actual shop area, and then I can roll it back out of the way when I don't need it. Now, of course, they have designated setups for this, but this way I can kind of make it exactly how I want it, and it's a pretty cheap and easy project for me to get used to my new miter saw. So I feel like it's a pretty good starter project, so I was just going to show you guys what I came up with based on the other videos that were out there. I'll run through my cut list if you want to make this exact cart. Mine is specifically going to be set up so I can use the 29-inch tall Craftsman sawhorses. So yours will vary depending on what you want to use as additional support in the future. So for example, this whole cart is going to be about 6 feet wide when it's fully expanded, but I'm not going to have it at that size all the time. And there's definitely going to be boards that are longer than that, so I'm going to have those sawhorses as extra support. So we've got 4 24 and 1/8 inch long boards over here, 3 19-inch, 2 18-inch, 2 15-inch, and 2 6-inch. And then that top piece up there, that is 19 by 22 inches. And I've got my miter saw over here, so the height of the actual cutting surface is 3 inches. So just a little bit shorter than these 6-inch 2x4s right here. So we're going to narrow those down a little bit so we have a nice clean surface all the way across to cut on. These two brackets right here, I'll put a link down in the description. I got them off Amazon. It was 20 bucks for the set of 2, which I think is actually a pretty good deal. A lot of people will put hinges and little wings that fold out on the side of their cart. I think this is a lot cheaper and easier, and I think is a little bit more elegant as well. Of course, whatever screw you want to use, I'm using 3-inch long number 10s. Some sort of wheels. I got these at Harbor Freight. Now that I'm thinking about it, I should have gotten some that lock, so I'll probably be replacing those in the future. And then some way of measuring and making sure everything is square. And the reason I'm doing all this now is we're going to build a huge 16-foot long bench right here with some shelving and everything. So I'm going to need this cart so I can use my miter saw as effectively as possible as we build this tomorrow. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I've already everything cut, obviously, so I'm just going to be assembling it. And as I get pieces put together, I'll show you what I'm doing. Of course, this is our board that is going to be used for the miter saw as the platform. I'm going to put 2x4s around the base here, 4 legs, and then a little crossbar across the bottom. And then we'll have our casters on it. These 2 wings on the side, I've got to cut little wings for that. They're going to be 6 inches wide because that's how long my cut deck is. And I'm not going to be cutting anything wider than a 6-inch board with this saw anyway, so I don't need these huge wide wings. One recommendation before getting started is definitely invest in a set of drill bits for countersinking. So these are specifically designed for the size screw that I'm using, the number 10s, and it said this nice little countersink here. The distance, I can adjust it, so depending on how far I want to go into the wood, and make sure I don't split anything, and make assembling everything a lot easier. So you can go ahead and pre-drill some holes, and then I've got the impact down here, which I'm going to be using to run the screws in. So it'll be nice and easy to switch back and forth. I won't have to undo this 1,000 times. Framing that is going to make the basis of this miter saw stand. So I'm going to use this flat piece of OSB. It's going to cover that up, and that's what the actual saw is going to be attached to. We're going to put those 2 6-inch boards here once we cut them down to the right size, and that will make the basis, and then we'll put our legs on. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and screw this down with a bunch of smaller screws. You don't need these 3-inch screws to hold this down. I can just use like 1 5/8 or something like that. So we'll go evenly place these all the way around. Again, I was using my carpenter square to make sure it was as square as I could get it. I'm not going to be a super perfectionist about this. I'm just going to get it close so that it works. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect. Just do the best that you can. They do have 90-degree clamps, which is something I might invest in to hold the boards for me, so I'm not having to hold 2 boards and this and the drill at the same time. It kind of makes for a difficult situation. So I'll go ahead and screw this down, and then we'll move on to the legs. you know, sturdy it feels. So I'm going to go ahead and place the saw on. So now you should be able to get an idea of what this is going to look like. So the saw will be placed right here in the middle, and you'll have these blocks here, so they're still a little bit too tall. So I'm going to mark on here the right height so that the board just glides right across this. And then we'll have our brackets here. We'll have one per side. It'll sit just like this, and we will have a board that sits right up here and goes all the way out, and that will nicely support whatever length board we want to put on here, because you're going to be cutting usually towards one end a little bit, so you'll have it longer on one side or the other, and then we'll just use the assistance of the sawhorse on that end. So go ahead and cut these down with the saw, because we can get almost that full length in here, almost that full 6 inches on the cut, actually a little bit past that, so we should be okay. So I have the 2 supports on the side here set up, so those are ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and use these lag bolts here to hold the saw down. These are just ones I happen to have. They're a tiny bit long, what I'm using them for, but it's fine. There's nothing that's going to be under there that they're going to interfere with. So we'll go ahead, run these down. Of course, I'm going to pre-drill a hole here and get everything mounted, but you can really mount it with whatever you think is strong enough to hold it down. The holes on here are pretty generously sized, so you've got a bunch of different options. Just make sure that it's held down well so that in the future you don't have a problem. So you can see the idea we had for the legs here. So I've got these 2 24-inch pieces here, 15-inch piece going across, and we've got our wheels attached. But we'll duplicate this on the other side and then put our cross piece in, and then we'll be able to work on the wings. So I'm sorry I had to cut the time lapse off. I was running out of room on my SD card, but we have all of the wheels on, so everything is balanced. I did have to put a shim under one corner to make sure everything was level and it rolled nicely. And then I've got the wings cut here. So this is one wing right here and the other one's already attached. I attached the bracket to the actual stand with the number 6, 1, and 5/8 screws that we were using earlier to attach the top to the frame here, and those went in all 6, very sturdy. Then I'm using these much smaller 1/2-inch screws right here. They're very small. It's the only one I had that was short enough. Of course, you could use a longer, larger screw and then just cut the head off and grind it down with an angle grinder. But I had these, so I'm going to go ahead and use them. So here is how this is going to work. So I've got my side here. I release this little release here, pull it up, and I've got this nice big platform here that I can sit 2x4 on and have plenty of support on either side once both are set up. Nice even transition all the way across here. I'm going to take my orbital sander and go around, clean up all these edges and just make everything nicer so I'm not getting splinters on myself. Everything looks a little bit cleaner. And then whenever I paint the walls, I'll get an exterior white and I'll paint this just so it looks a little bit nicer and more cohesive. The only thing about this is it's got a little side-to-side wobble. It's not a huge deal. Most people make these a lot bigger, these 2 brackets per side, make it a little bit more stable. I think this is perfectly fine. I see no reason for it to cause a problem because the main thing is I want the support up and down, and that it's got in spades. I think this can support like 130 pounds or something like that, so it should be more than sturdy enough. The working height is a little bit low, but again, I had to make it match up with those Craftsman sawhorses. So you could always make your sawhorses a little bit taller and then make this whole setup taller. It's not a huge deal, it's just something for you to think about. But overall, I'm really happy with it. For less than $50 in materials, I think it's actually a pretty solid setup. So go ahead and get this finished, clean it all up, and I'll show you guys the finished product. Well, here's the finished product. Honestly, I'm really happy with how it turned out. I think it's going to do exactly what I want it to do from one side to the other. I have almost 6 full feet of surface area to work with, so I should be able to hold pretty much any size board I want, especially once you add in the added functionality of the sawhorses. This should work perfectly. So it moves perfectly fine. So I've got my rollers on the side. And then on the front, I've got those solid wheels. I can put my wings down. And it's super compact. I went ahead on the back and using my hole saw, a dowel, and a drill bit that was slightly smaller in the dowel, I made this little area to hold the cord on the back. So honestly, I'm pretty happy with it. I mean, the only thing is it could be maybe just a little bit taller, but even then, this will be perfectly fine. So I'll clean it up with the orbital later. It's getting a little bit late, but everything sits on here nicely. Of course, if you guys have any questions or comments, always drop those down below. This is just a no-frills miter saw cart, and I think this should work perfectly fine for pretty much anyone who's doing just the occasional work in the garage. This is not for a professional, but it'll get the job done for most of us. So, like I said, hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys next week.